Due to popular demand, we are back with some reaction videos. This time we have a few specifically on relationships. Let's go.
As a divorce lawyer, I think it's absolutely critical that you live with your partner for at least a year before you get married. Living together gives you both the opportunity to learn each other's true colors. You'll see how they handle conflict. You'll see how they manage their money. You'll see how they contribute to household chores. Do they leave dishes in the sink? Do they leave their clothes all over the place? I wish I had taken my own advice. So if you're gonna get married before living together, you're making a huge mistake. Don't do it.
Nonsense. That is utter nonsense. Let me say this as clearly as I can. There's nothing you can learn about somebody from living with that person that has any relevance to a lasting, loving, married relationship that you can't learn from not living with that person. I've been married coming up on 25 years, did not live with my wife, and all those things he talked about, I knew clearly not living with her. And by the way, there's actually good reason to believe that living with somebody puts you at a disadvantage, which means you might be more likely to get divorced. Which, now that I bring it full circle, you just got advice from a divorce lawyer. How exactly does he get business? Not by helping you have a lasting, loving marriage, but by setting you up for divorce. So with all due respect, if you want a lasting, loving marriage, do not take that advice. Don't live together before you get married. All right, let's keep it rolling.
Are open relationships sustainable? In other words, can you have long-term open relationships and have it be worthwhile and happy and one of the best relationships you'll ever have? And people find this out later in life with enough experience. The answer is here's why. It's because you're in an open relationship for ethical and moral reasons and for the happiness of every party involved.
Okay, stop and think about this reasoning. He's asking if a relationship of at least 3 people or more will work. And his answer is, if you go in with the right motivation and you do it out of happiness, therefore it's going to work. Friends, that reasoning doesn't work. There's a lot of bad ideas you can go into with good motivations. Now, I'm not gonna question anybody's motivation in an open relationship. I'm sure most people are going into it because they want to love more people. Fine. My question, is it going to work? And I don't think it's going to work for a few reasons. Number one is jealousy. You add a third to 2 that are existing, and there's no way, humanly speaking, over time, there's going to be equal love between the 3 of you and more. It's going to be 60-40, it's going to be 70-30. Jealousy is going to tear it apart. Don't believe me? Just go on Reddit and read all the comments and conversations about open relationships, and it's clear this is happening all over the place. Now, you can find that in marriage, but this is because of the kind of a relationship that an open relationship is. You also think about the kids. Is this best for the kids? The answer is hands down no. All the sociological research shows that kids flourish the best with a mom and a dad, any more and any less, and there tends to be increased difficulties for the kids. I don't buy it. Next.
There's no reason that your spouse shouldn't have all of your passwords and all of the access to your phone and your location. There's no reason.
It's a really interesting question. I could hear somebody making a case that I give my spouse all my passcodes to just show and have integrity and build trust into the relationship. I guess you could go that direction. I had a friend in college who told me, he said, yes, my girlfriend and I, we share all things just so we can kind of check up on each other. And I remember thinking, this kind of indicates a lack of trust if you have to go out of your way to do that. My wife and I have been married 24 years, completely trust each other. We've never sat down and tried to share our passcodes. It hasn't even crossed my mind to do so. Of course she could check it if we wanted to, but we've built in trust on the little things, so have never needed to take those steps. By the way, if you get to the point where you're like, I just want to share all my passcodes, and your spouse does the same, well, they still could be keeping passcodes from you. So the bottom line is just sharing passcodes or thinking you are isn't going to fix it in itself. There has to be deeper trust in the relationship built from the bottom up. That's really what matters most.
Emotions make dating so Weird. Doesn't have to be weird. God told me to date this person. God told me to stay single for 4 years. God. And we put so much blame on God when God is looking at us and saying, hey, I gave you free will. I gave you wisdom to pick somebody that would help you in life, that you could love and build a family with. So why don't you just use your brain and go do it?
Mic drop. Thank you. Well said. Share that video with somebody else. He's exactly right. We make dating weird and we make it non-biblical. The Bible doesn't talk about dating. Why? Because they're arranged marriages. But we do have choice. God has given us free will. Like he said, we should use wisdom. But there's another piece, which is God's moral law about how we're supposed to love and treat people. So when we're looking for a spouse, there's nothing in the Bible that says, try to find this secret spouse God has picked for you. Rather, it talks about using wisdom to find somebody. That's the key. I love it. Doesn't have to be that hard.
I would say probably 4 minutes.
All right, that's pretty funny. We do have ridiculous stories we tell about dating within the church. 4 minutes. I actually dated my wife probably about 10 years before we got married. So should it be 4 minutes or 10 years? Here's what I think the bottom line is. There's no rule that applies to everybody. People have different levels of maturity. They have different ages. And some people can find out more quickly if they're ready to get married than others. I don't think I've ever met somebody who regretted dating too long, but I've met a lot of people who regretted dating too quickly and rushing into marriage. That's a principle. Make sure you pray about it, get a lot of input from people who know you and give you wisdom. Make sure you're on the same page with your life and your ministry, and then go for it. And remember, you're making a decision that's meant to be for a lifetime. All right, let's keep it rolling.
Are soulmates real or not? Now, we've all heard the fairy tales and seen the movies, but the question is whether or not it's biblical. Here's the problem with the concept of soulmates. In order to believe in it, you have to disregard your belief in free will. Let me tell you why. If you believe in free will, you basically believe that man has the ability to operate outside of the perfect will of God. Well then, say one person got with somebody that was not meant to be their soulmate, since free will makes that possible. Well, that would mean that that person's intended soulmate would end up marrying someone they weren't supposed to be with as well. The same thing would be true for that person's soulmate and their soulmate, so on, so forth. Meaning that just one person deciding to operate outside of the perfect will of God would completely throw his plan off course. And that doesn't sound like a divine plan to me.
Now, I love this pushback on soulmates. I think he's right that the key question for Christians is this biblical? Now, technically, he made kind of a theological argument from the character of God and his divine plan. And it's interesting to say, if there were a divine plan and A is supposed to marry B, and C is supposed to marry D, but A marries C, you mess the entire thing up, and that seems crazy, so maybe God hasn't charted it out that way. I think that's a fair theological critique. But biblically, there's not a shred of evidence that there's this soulmate that you're just supposed to find, and this person is going to fill you up and be your partner, like on that level, the way we see it in culture. This is far more of a Disney Western idea than it is a biblical idea. Now, I've been married over 24 years to my high school sweetheart. In one sense, I'd say she's my soulmate. But that's because we've committed to each other. We've sacrificed for each other. I can't imagine life without my wife. We've built a life together and sacrificed for each other. That's because we followed biblical plans of what marriage is for and how you're supposed to love one another. So I think he's making one good argument, but there's no good reason to think in the cultural way of a soulmate that we're supposed to look for one. I don't buy it.
Can I just say something really quick? We know that he who finds a wife finds a good thing, but it's funny that Eve was brought to the man. So although Adam found her, she was brought. No, ladies, be patient. Stop seeking, because yes, he'll find you, but the Lord will put you in a position to be found.
All right. Super interesting to look at the story and think about the fact that God brought Eve to Adam. The question is, are we supposed to look at that story and draw marital principles for ourselves or dating principles today? And the answer is an unequivocal no. Nobody in the Bible points back to that story and says, here's how you should date, here's how you should find a spouse. It doesn't exist. We're learning about the creation of the world and the first marriage. So, interesting story. By the way, there's a lot of crazy stories in the Old Testament we don't point to for models today because it's narrative. So, great story, interesting fact, but it's not set up as a model for how we should date or expect a spouse today. I think that's tweaking what the Bible is meant for. Hope you enjoyed these. Let us know in the comments if you want me to keep doing more reaction videos or any topics or themes you'd love for me to cover. Make sure you share this with a friend, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.